Hey people, this is my sister Laura.
Hey, this is my sister Jean. We are the Reclamation Sisters.
I'm glad you know that. So I'm a person in long-term recovery.
And I'm not.
Be glad.
So I don't really get it. And I think that's part of the reason it's taken me so long to be able to say that we can reclaim our relationship, because I didn't get it. There's so much I think family members don't understand, and it doesn't just happen by accident. And I think that's why it took so long, because I was doing no work on it. I was just watching it happen and expecting it to just get better, which it just can't get better on its own.
Nope.
So why don't you tell us about that process of, how do you get better? How do you recover from such a situation?
Well, I think a lot of people think that if you just ignore it, it will go away. But
that's what I did. So. It didn't work.
So there's a lot of work that goes into reclaiming your life and kind of fixing the wasteland that occurs because of the damage that we cause ourselves and our family members. But I don't think that family understands, nor do people who are originally or initially seeking treatment understand what treatment is or the process of treatment, because it's not something you're familiar with unless you're engaged in it. And so I know that initially super resistant to the idea that like somebody else was going to fix my life or the things that were uncomfortable that were going on. And so, you go to counseling, everybody's like, well, you need to see somebody, or you must just be depressed. And so you see a doctor and they give you lots of meds, but that doesn't fix the underlying issue. And so treatment is about fixing all of the things that are wrong, and substances are what we use to numb those things that are wrong, because we don't want to feel them or think about them. So the continuum of care, as we call it in my world, consists of different types of treatment. So you can go to outpatient, or you can engage in prevention from further use. But initially, it's an outpatient setting. If it's not escalated so much, you don't meet several criteria. You can go to intensive outpatient. So outpatient being like you go once a week and see somebody, and you might take a group and learn about your addiction issues and how to think and feel and change distorted thinking. Intensive outpatient is more like 9 or 10 hours a week. You go 3 days a week and you participate in groups, and then you have an individual session. Most people are just familiar with, you go to counseling, or if you're engaged in a substance that you might have to detox from. And I don't think people understand it's not just alcohol. Benzodiazepines or opiates, we place people into a detoxification setting for 3 to 5 days, maybe 7.
I don't know what any of those words mean. A minute ago I said something about being sober, and she was like, no, it's not sober.
No, we're not sober.
So let's talk about what you just said, those words. What did you say?
Opiates?
I don't know. Opiates, the benzo something, and
benzodiazepines.
Yeah. And so talk about those two words, but then the difference between what you clarified for me is sober versus clean. Because again, I've lived this for however many years you've been living through it, and I still didn't know until 2 minutes ago what the difference was. So I guarantee there are other people out there who don't know the difference between those main things.
Well, it's a foreign language.
Yeah.
I mean, it absolutely is a foreign language. So people who recover from alcohol participate in programming, and they choose to use the language that describes them as sober, and they don't drink alcohol. Alcohol is their problem. They don't have problems with other substances most of the time. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have multiple polysubstance use, but if you are part of that community that addresses alcohol, you're in sobriety and you are sober. But in a world of chemical dependency and substance abuse, and you're recovering from a drug of your choice, you are clean, because you are clean from putting toxins in your body and engaging in those behaviors. So there's many paths to recovery. Some people just say they're in long-term recovery, or I'm a person who no longer uses substances, but most of the time it's sober is alcohol or clean is drugs.
And you say that you are clean and that you are a person in long-term recovery.
Right.
That's how you refer to yourself. So.
Right. So a person in long-term recovery is somebody who engages in living a lifestyle where they don't use the substance of their choice, and they move forward in changing all of their distorted thinking and patterns related to use, and then they move forward. And then you have abstinence, which is anybody who doesn't use any alcohol or any substances, any chemicals, and so you can abstain from all use. So very different depending on the path to wellness that you choose.
So I know drugs are drugs, right? Don't do drugs. So I know drugs. But then you said the opiates versus opioids or opiates. What is it?
Well, there's opioids as classification, and then there's opiate medication.
So which one's the broader term? Opiate?
Yeah, opiate. That's your heroin and your fentanyl and your carfentanil, pink, I don't know. Cray, things like that. There's also your morphine. It's painkillers.
Okay.
Opiates are your painkillers.
All right.
And then benzos being your anti-anxiety medication, like Mother's Little Helper. So
my boys are my little helpers.
But benzodiazepines are medications like your Valium, your Xanax, things like that.
Okay.
Terribly awry if you mix alcohol with a benzo because they suppress your system, which a lot of people, when they're in a super anxious setting, will take a benzo and then drink. And it can put you into cardiac arrest. But they suppress your system, but you must be tapered off of them. You can't just stop taking.
Professionally?
Yeah, you go to and that's what detox is. Okay. Also with alcohol. Alcohol being one of the most severe, because if you just have drank your entire life or you are a heavy consumer of alcohol, you can go into delirium tremors, you can have seizures, your body doesn't know how to respond to that. So you are placed in a setting where they medically monitor you. So that's like another level of care in the continuum, is medically monitored treatment. And then once you're stabilized, depending on the state you're in, there's rehabilitation or there's stabilization into rehabilitation. So that's rehab.
Okay. I think this is where one of the things that it took me a long time to learn about was that it wasn't like you were just choosing like to be an like to go make these horrible decisions and do things that were hurting the family. It wasn't like you were consciously like, yeah, I want to do that, like that, yeah.
I choose that failure in my life.
Yeah. But I definitely did not understand that your brain is so affected by all of these things that you're putting in your body that you can't possibly make the good,
rational choices.
Yeah. So not just when you're under the influence of whatever your drug of choice, as you say, is, but as a result of the drug of choice, your brain is altered to the point that you, even when you're not actively using that, you can't make those, conscious choices, good choices.
We call it distorted thinking.
Oh, well, I mean, that makes sense. That was one of my big frustrations. Like, I know she's smarter than this. Like, what in the
I'm super smart.
So smart. is she doing, I wasn't trying to understand. I was just thought it would just happen. Like, it would just
because you have an obsessive compulsive drive to use. That's what addiction is. You're obsessed with it. Your brain's like, listen, all of it, all day, all night, every day. Give it to me.
Oh God. So I think the family members who are non-users and who don't understand that really have to do some educating. We really have to learn what it is they're going through and how you have to get better, because if I don't understand that, I'm just going to continually be frustrated with your decision making, and that relationship won't come back, because it's just going to be, I'm just going to be constantly pissed off with what you're doing, you know, as if you're doing it on purpose, as if you're, damaging relationships on purpose, which obviously you're not.
Let me drive a Mack truck through it all.
Someone just drove a Mack truck into my house, though, last week.
True story.
So I think, understanding this cycle of recovery is critical for family members, because even when I was being, I don't know, was I just not, like, I had to shut it off, but whatever, when I was distant and not really giving what you were going through at that point, you had to figure it out. But do you think it's even possible for somebody to figure it out on their own? Because we had parents who would do anything for her. So, there's a lot of people out there who their parents are like, you kick them out, and you're not helping. So can somebody even do this on their own?
No, and that's what people have to understand. In the continuum is where you find, oftentimes you build a family of your choice, and you find sober supports or clean supports or people from a fellowship that are empathic to what you've gone through. Like, they understand, like, it's not the exact same situation, but they're similar, and you're like sharing, and they're like, oh my God, me too. Like, that's so me. I mean, I didn't do that, but I did this. And then all of a sudden you find like you're talking about these things. But people have to understand that you have to have sober supports no matter what. But addiction is a family disease. And that there was something that wasn't clicking, and and it wasn't being talked about, and it would be okay, and then it makes the whole family sick. Many families struggle, and many people struggle to get clean because they don't have a cohesive family unit, or people have to understand that trauma of any kind, adverse childhood experiences create reasons that people are more likely to engage in use because they don't have that solid foundation to build their life on. And so, it wasn't just that I was sick. We were all sick, and it takes a long time to be comfortable and vulnerable and have authentic conversations about really what went wrong. So
I think a super long time, and for people to understand, like, it's not like, oh, she stopped using, like, great, like, everything's fine. Like, it's not fine.
It's so not fine.
So not fine for, like, a super long time. So you started using, like, 20-something years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 16 when I used the first time, but then I didn't use...
That was more than 20 years ago, because...
It was like 20 years ago.
We're approaching 50 now. So, but the real problem you said was cocaine addiction was like 20.
Oh, pants on fire. Yeah. Burning it down.
That was like over 20 years ago. So that's a long time. And it's not like I didn't speak to her for 20 years, but I certainly didn't have a relationship with her for, a good relationship with her for a lot of that time. But it's because I wasn't working on anything either. Like I said, I was just like, it's fine. Everything's fine. Or I know it's not fine and I don't have time for it. So I'm going to choose not to care. So that didn't fix anything. So you've been sober for how long now? Or not sober?
Clean. 8 years.
Clean.
Last week.
Yeah. So, and I only know that it was last week because it popped up on my Facebook memories or whatever, because at her 5-year mark, I had posted for the first time. And that was honestly the first time.
Oh, it was humongous.
Yeah. So, that was like a turning point for us. And I don't know what made me feel at that point, like, okay, like I'm ready. But I remember when I posted that and acknowledged it publicly, that a lot of my friends were like, oh my God, I had no idea, right? Because I wasn't going around like, my sister's an addict or she's in recovery. Like, it's embarrassment, for a long time. Or
it's shame.
We'll talk about the difference later. I don't know. In that 5 years, what did you accomplish that now makes you so knowledgeable, aside from living through it, but so knowledgeable on recovery?
Well, because I went through the continuum, so I didn't have to go to detox, and several times over the years I tried to solve all these problems. I went to rehab. The first time I went, I didn't make it 36 hours, and I got kicked out.
I didn't know that!
I did! Because
like back in your 20s?
No, when I lived in Kansas.
We'll talk about that later, but I can't even keep up with the places that you have lived. So.
I've lived a lot of places. So anyway, then like a week later, I went to rehab and stayed, and I graduated, and it was a 28-day program, and I had no idea. I just know when I tried to go the first time, I was like, if I don't go, like, I'm probably going to die. Like, I'm going to do something terrible, or somebody's going to do something terrible to me. I was in full-on crisis, and I just remember I was going through the phone book going, I know they talk about this, like, heard about it. I just called this place, and I was like, if you don't take me today, I'm going to die. So he was like, well, pack your bag and come on. And luckily, they had a bed. So I did okay for a long time. I moved right after that, like a couple weeks later, after I completed treatment, back home, and I was clean for, I don't know, several years, but I never addressed anything. And I went to a couple fellowship meetings of my choice, and I had a sponsor, but I didn't really understand what working a program meant. And so I relapsed. Then I got a couple more years clean.
And that's what made me so angry, because, again, I wasn't putting any effort into understanding what was going on. I was like, how could you have all that time clean and like throw it away and make a dumb decision again? You know what I mean?
Light it on fire.
So, again, families have to understand what the addict is going through, or that it's never going to, like, come together, because I'm your sister, but I'm not your parent. So I'm not the one, like, responsible for helping you.
Right.
And so I let that go. But parents, I think, are, if, you're really a good parent, you have to understand that you're the one who has to keep helping. It's not another child's responsibility. You have to have somebody who understands, so that they don't just go, oh, she relapsed, she did it again, like, I'm done, I'm not helping her anymore. Because you're not relapsing on purpose.
No.
You're relapsing because something didn't fully get fixed to allow you.
Oh my God, so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I just stopped using. So there's a terminology that's related to if you stop drinking and you just don't work on anything, you're a dry drunk because you're still in the behaviors. But in addiction, we don't look at it that way. It's about building that new life with the appropriate supports. After I relapsed the second time, I went back to treatment. I was in really bad shape. I only went for 21 days. It was a shorter program, and it was more like, just go to get it over with. It was like, I know all this stuff. I've been here, done that before. I know what you're talking about. But you don't. And that's the problem, is a lot of programs don't really cover everything you need. And that's why the continuum of care is so important. After I relapsed the third time, I had some time again. I had several years
again. And again, I was like, what are you doing? Like, you
it up.
Yes.
So I went to what they call long-term rehabilitation. And after detox, you can go to rehab, or you can go to outpatient or intensive outpatient. They also have partial hospitalization, where you go like every day, all day, and then you go home. But I went to a long-term program, and it was 90 days. And you can go anywhere from 45 to 90, but I went for 90 days. And then I worked with those people to find the next level of care, which in Pennsylvania is called a halfway house. And you go and you can stay for 3 months to 9 months, or maybe a year, depending on your needs. And you are habilitated into learning new things and new ways of coping, and the importance of fellowships and sober supports. And you get to kind of get your life kind of mapped back out. A lot of people need a lot of medical care at that point. So that's done during that. From that point, I moved to Harrisburg after I went to long-term treatment, and I settled into that program. And then luckily I had met a wonderful group of people in Harrisburg, and there was a program, and I was really blessed with that. And so I moved into a program that had housing above it, and you shared common space, but I had like a little room. And so I lived in sober living after I did a halfway house. And then there was a program downstairs, and I went to meetings, and I had a mentor and a certified recovery specialist, and I took classes. I went to outpatient. I saw my doctor. I got a part-time job, and I got my first credential in learning about this process more. And so from that point, I stayed there for 10 months, and then I left there and lived with somebody in recovery, and we shared a place and continued in our treatment. But from start to finish, people don't understand. Like, I was in treatment for 18 months. I could have stayed longer, but I was ready to move forward in school. I went back to school. So I got my certified recovery coach or specialist, depending on your state, credential, and started working for a second chance lawn care company and working with guys coming from work release in the jails. And I worked with men in the halfway house across from where I was. And I was like, well, I should maybe look at this. And I just decided, with the encouragement of the people from the Miracle Group where I lived, to go back to school. But school was also part of that healing and recovery process. And it was 3 years of me just going to meetings and working with my sponsor and engaging in activities that, I mean, when I was young, I'd be like, there's no way I'm going to a picnic and like eating pickled eggs. I don't think so. But we'd go to speaker jams and conventions and conferences and convenferences, which is a made up word in recovery. It's a conference and a convention, and they like bring it together, and then there's like a dance. And I'd go to dances. Yep. In the hood. And so I did things outside of my comfort zone, but what people don't have to participate in lets them fail. And if you have to participate in those things, from that great seat of discomfort comes your biggest growth. So dances in the hood and picnics with people I didn't know. Like, I play softball and all kinds of stuff. Don't be a hater.
Oh my God. And so that's what I was hoping you would get to when I said, like, what you did in that, 5-year period.
Oh my God.
She got her master's degree, and I'm like just now finishing my master's degree, and it's a 30 credit program, and it's like bad enough, right? Like, hers was 90, a 90 credit master's degree while getting sober or clean, please. So I think that, and it was like, that took you 3 years. So that
was forever.
Yeah. And so
oh my God, forever.
I think it was right after that the 5-year mark, sort of came. I don't know if that's what made me, like, when you were, we acknowledged that you got your master's.
Yeah, because I went back to work where I got clean.
Like, That's a big deal. Yeah. And I hadn't even started my master's program at that point. I wasn't even comparing it to that. I just knew that, all right, like maybe this is it. But I think every time,
It's crazy.
every time you relapsed, I was always like, it's not a big deal. She's made it to 2 years before, so I wouldn't get excited. And then you'd made it to the one time I think you had three solid years in when you relapsed. So I was like, well, I'm not going to get, psyched up because she's screwed up 3 years before. And then you relapsed again. In my mind, I'm like, see? This is why I don't care.
I see how you are.
But, you get to the point, I don't know, but something happened where at that point where I was like, all right, I'm going to acknowledge it. But when some of my friends said, when I posted that it was like, I'm going to care this time. Like, I'm going to give you a public shout out and recognize that it's like a big deal. That the fact that some of my friends did say, I had no idea, really helped me see how much I had hidden it.
Because everybody else knew. Just not your people. The whole world knew.
I guess that was I consciously trying to make sure people didn't know that about you, or did I not want them to know that about me?
Shame.
It's all very new to me. But yeah, I think that obviously that was part of it because I obviously worked hard because I had lived here at that point a long time, at least 5 years at that point. And so I must have worked hard to make sure nobody knew that about me, to, I don't know if it was putting me in a bubble or putting you in a bubble.
Because I was gone.
I definitely know that I had a period where I was like, all right, she deserves some recognition for this. She's accomplished a lot in this time, and let's hope she doesn't F it up again. And, thankfully you didn't. And now you have reached. We didn't do anything here. You
didn't do anything.
No, that's not,
I did.
I didn't do anything to help her. So yeah, 8 years. And so it's a big deal. So now, again, I kind of had another turning point where I was like, even after that 5 years where I acknowledged it, it was still like, it was a bit of a wall, where yeah. And so I definitely reached a point just recently where I was like, you know what? I've missed her.
I thought she was messing with me.
And she'd come around, with my boys and stuff. And but even for a long time, I was like, I would just kind of silently seethe, quietly. And my husband was really the one bridging the gap. I feel like now, for whatever reason, ready to reclaim it. And we're going to have a lot. And I think the fact that of us, sharing with each other, which we've not really done before.
We don't want to talk about it. I'll talk all day about it. I talk all day about addiction.
But I guess it's shame, not embarrassment, that I did not want to talk about it. So if we can talk about that, I know that our relationship will get better, and I know it will help our extended relationships in our family as well, including with my boys. But hopefully, obviously, we're going to be able to help other people because I'm a librarian. I love to read. I do it all day long. So I feel like I've read a lot of books, mostly lately, that have helped me also see the perspective of other family members and how they felt. Everybody's, I know, recovery process is different, but you still have moments where you're, like you said, you're like, oh my God, me too. And I feel like reading about other people maybe feeling that same sense of not wanting to acknowledge it, or some people saying you're on your own, you effed up too many times. And so you do get that sense of camaraderie, which I think is really important. So from my perspective, people who are non-users, loved ones or family members, I hopefully will be able to relate to some things that I'm saying and maybe learn from what I'm finally realizing. And of course, people who are either clean, sober, or struggling still in addiction will learn a lot from you. So yeah, so we hope you'll join us on our journey to reclaim our relationship.
See you next time.
See ya. Oh, that's a good one.
Good job. Will it cover my neck?
Aren't you good? All right. Different kinds, what you've been through, why some of them worked, some of them didn't. Why